Go. Hey everybody, welcome to the free GMAT prep hour on September 23rd. I am your host, Reed Arnold, here talking to you today about some sentence correction stuff. First thing, some free options from Manhattan Prep. You can try any of our first classes for free, get a taste for the structure, the instructor, get some information on the class. Basically, you get 1/9 of the course at no charge. So we have online classes in several cities across the US. So if you're interested, take a look at that. Same thing with the on-demand course. So if you're looking for some free GMAT prep, we have other options available. Today's lesson, I've loosely titled it Reading for Meaning and Structure, which is, I know, the most exciting thing you've heard in your entire life. We're talking today about some sentence correction. Okay, and I'm really hoping to get across two main ideas and skills that is pertinent to GMAT sentence correction. The first being that while grammar is undoubtedly part of GMAT sentence correction, you will encounter many times, excuse me, there will be many times when you encounter a sentence where one of multiple answers are actually grammatically correct, right? There's no actual grammar error. Or if there is one, it's like super obscure and really rare and kind of hard to deal with. And even if an answer is grammatically correct, it can still be wrong for a different reason, namely due to the meaning of the sentence. Okay, so we're going to talk today about like reading a sentence for meaning and reading it specifically for the meaning that is there. And we'll talk about what I mean by that. The other thing I want to impart to you about sentence correction is that a lot of times you need to step back and just look at the structure of a sentence, just how the sentence is built. And I think one aspect of that is kind of knowing what needs to come in a sentence after a certain introduction, or what needs to precede certain words in a sentence based on what structures are there. And so I'm hoping to give you some drills and just give you some exercises and just to get you thinking about how sentences are built structurally and how to see through the language, right? Not really read for the language that is there, but read for the structure. And then in another time, read for the language that is there exactly as it's written. Those are the two skills I'm going for today. Are there any questions about anything before we pop up? Feel free to type in the chat. I hope to see it. If not, ask again. It will eventually cross my eye. But feel free to interrupt me with any questions or concerns as they come. Okay, so let's start with reading like a robot and a human. At the same time, I'm kind of fighting a cold. Please forgive my just horrible coughs that come up from time to time. Reading like a robot and a human. So you have to be able to do both on GMAT sentence correction. And reading like a human, I mean, you need to do what you do in day-to-day life. Okay, we all read like humans pretty well. That is, you read a sentence and you know what that sentence is trying to say, right? You know the information, you make sense of the information, you know what it's saying. Reading like a robot is the trickier thing. And reading like a robot requires you to read using the specific rules of grammar that the GMAT tests again and again and again, and to know, yes, how those, when those rules are broken, but also how those rules and how different structures affect the meaning of the sentence. Okay, and what you're really going for is for the robot understanding and the human understanding to meld and be the same sentence, right? What often happens is the human understanding is there, but a robot, if it read the sentence, would struggle or would get a totally different meaning from what a human would understand in that sentence. That might not make sense now, but it should soon. So on this page here, I have 3 sentences for you. All of them, just up front, all of them are 100% grammatically correct. Like Microsoft Word doesn't give me a green squiggly line for any of these sentences. All right. So what I'm curious is for you all to read these 3, and I want you to tell me which one you think the GMAT would prefer. I mean, obviously the GMAT wouldn't give a sentence exactly like this, but using GMAT style thinking, which of these do you think is correct? Maggie thinks the second one. Ben says the second one. The second one, the last one, the third, the first, the first, the third, the first, the second. Okay, so we kind of have a hodgepodge of answers coming through. And my question is, why do you think your choice is the one the GMAT prefers, or why one that is not your choice is incorrect? Okay, so Ryan says that sweating is the product of the first action. Ben says the comma ing modifier, that would be the second one, modifies a subject-verb clause, which is very, very true. Sweat, and Sue says sweating and caring at the same time. Okay. Someone says the third is too wordy. It does use more words, but I don't know if it's necessarily too wordy. Okay. Let's start with that third one though, because I think it's the easiest one to deal with. All right, and let's look at that word which. Okay. What is the word which? Yeah, Ryan's already got that there. The word which on the GMAT has a very fixed rule, and it's a rule that we break all the time in day-to-day life, which is why it's so hard to notice when someone breaks it on the GMAT. Okay, I actually just broke the rule by using which incorrectly. Which does not modify whole clauses. Which modifies the noun preceding it. Okay, that's just what which does. And so the GMAT computer, when it reads this sentence, says, okay, she carried the trunk up the staircase. Cool, I know what those words are. Which caused her, which, the staircase, caused her to sweat the whole way up. And a computer has no problem with that, because a computer doesn't understand that a staircase can't cause someone to sweat, right? The computer doesn't have the human understanding that we have. So it's like, cool, yeah, she carried a trunk up a staircase. The staircase caused her to sweat. Doesn't really understand what those words mean, but it gets, the meaning of the sentence from the definitions of the word. All right, no grammar error. But as a human, if I read that sentence as a computer reads that sentence, I know, hold up, that's not right, because the staircase isn't really what caused her to sweat. So this third one, though grammatically, technically correct, right? It has a clause. She carried the trunk up the staircase. It has a noun modifier for a noun in that clause, but the meaning makes it incorrect. All right. So now let's look at these first two. Okay. Again, very similar. Someone mentioned earlier that sweating is a comma ing modifier, and comma ing modifiers on the GMAT have a very set function as well. They modify clauses. And I hate to use too many grammar terms, but they modify how subjects do verbs. Okay? They modify how the subject does the verb. So what does this sentence mean? Like, what story does this sentence tell me? Try not to, repeat the sentence. In your own words, what story does this sentence tell me? Any thoughts? So Rupneen says that the sweating is modifying the staircase, but it's not modifying the staircase, because comma ing modifies subject-verb clauses. So it's modifying she carried the trunk up the staircase. So Pauline says she was sweating while she carried the trunk. And that's exactly right. Okay, it describes how she carried the trunk. She carried it sweating. Okay. How is this different? How is this different from sentence one? She carried the trunk up the staircase and sweated the whole way up. And yes, I hate that sweated is the past tense of sweat, but technically it is, so I used it. How is this second sentence different from the first? She carried and she sweated. So what's verbs not parallel? They are parallel. She carried, she sweated. That's perfect parallelism. Again, not a grammatical mistake here. Not past tense versus present. They're both technically past tense. So you're saying the verbs aren't parallel in the second tense, on the second sentence. Well, first off, there is no parallelism in the second sentence. And I want a big GMAT thing to know also. This word, sweating, is not a verb, okay? It's derived from a verb, but it's not a verb itself. It's a modifier derived from a verb. You might hear it called a present participle. Again, I try not to use too many grammar terms if I can avoid it. So in the second sentence, there is no parallel structure, where in the first there is. Okay, she carried and sweated. But I'm going to tell you that the GMAT prefers this second sentence, even though the first is also grammatically correct. Why? What does the first sentence lose that the second sentence has? And he says cause effect, and that's about what I'm going for here. Yeah, this second sentence makes it very clear that the sweating is connected to the carrying, right? It's modifying the carrying. Whereas in this first sentence, it's just two things that she happened to do. She carried the trunk and sweated. And as a human, right, human understanding, we know why she's sweating, because she's carrying a trunk up a staircase, okay? Adam, no, it can't be that the staircase is sweating because of what a comma ing modifier modifies. Comma ing modifies how a subject does a verb, and she is the subject of that subject verb clause. So it's not modifying the staircase, it's modifying how she carried the trunk. Okay, but in this first one, she just does two actions, and they're not linked, right? This sentence might as well be she carried the trunk and ate a Big Mac for lunch. Right? Just two things that she happened to do, two actions. And it's not that it's, sometimes you need the actions to be separated. Sometimes you need something like sentence one if they shouldn't be linked. But if they should be linked based on my human understanding of the situation, I'd rather link them. Okay? Does that make sense? Are there any questions I can answer about these three and how they're all correct? The computer doesn't flag them as a problem. It's just that the one that most matches my understanding with how I want the computer to understand is sentence two, right? In sentence two, the computer understands, she carried the trunk. That is part of the sweating. But that's not there in sentence one. Okay. So that's just an example. We're going to see a few more here. I want you to look at these sentences, these four sentences. I'm going to go off screen for a second. And I want you to really, really think about what they mean and what they're saying. Okay? And see if they all do. See if some of them, if you read them very literally like a computer would read them, what mistake is buried in them. All right. So that's about 2 minutes or so. Let's come on back and talk about some of these. Okay, I know, for the record, I know this is tough because we are so good at reading like humans, right? We are so good at reading like humans that we don't notice. We know, like, we don't notice when a computer would misunderstand. But one thing the GMAT is testing in many, many ways is objectivity. Being able to strip your own understanding and see something, your own perspective also, and see something for what it is, you know, like objectively. Okay, and all of these have a little quirk in them that probably would lead a computer to not understand the situation like I understand the situation when I want those two, again, to meld. Okay, so let's look at the first one. What meaning error do we find in this first sentence? How would a computer read this sentence? Any thoughts? Rachel says problems could be in the tech sector or businesses in the tech sector. Well, I don't quite understand that. I think should be problem facing. Should be the problem facing the business sector. I think either would be fine. The problem that businesses face, that'd be fine as well. That's just changing. There is a, I guess, a subtle meaning shift there, but I think that the GMAT would be fine with both. It does have to do with this problem. What is the primary problem? You, in your own human understanding, what is the problem? Staying relevant. Is that the problem? In your human understanding, is the problem staying relevant? The problem is that the fields are ever changing and unpredictable. Okay, and what does that have to do with staying relevant? Jan says the problem is adaptation, meaning what about adaptation? It's hard to keep up. It's hard to forecast. It is hard to stay relevant. Okay, the primary problem is not staying relevant. And I want you to think about, like, we know what that sentence means. I know exactly what it means when it says, man, it's a problem staying relevant in the tech sector. But as a computer reads this and says problem equals staying relevant. And that's not what I want a computer to think. I don't want a computer to say that staying relevant is a problem. The problem is that they are struggling to stay relevant, that it is hard to stay relevant. Staying relevant itself is not a problem. Okay? Again, your human understanding knows exactly what that means, but if you read it objectively, as a computer would, it says that the problem is staying relevant, as if staying relevant is a problem. And that's not quite what I want that sentence to mean. Okay, super subtle, but this is how you want to start reading sentences in sentence correction. Really read them for what they say. Okay. How about this second sentence? Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. What is the subtle meaning issue here? Any thoughts? I think someone had mentioned it earlier. I think I got lost in the text. Yeah, Pauline says a modification problem, and that's exactly right. Okay. Here, recognized for his prodigious talent at an early age, that's a modifier. It's describing something. And it's describing here the greatest composer who ever lived. And it's like, well, Mozart was the greatest composer that ever lived, according to this sentence. But that's like, it's not quite the meaning that I want to get across. I want the computer to know that Mozart was recognized for his prodigious talent at an early age, and that if someone else becomes the greatest composer, they maybe, I don't know if they were recognized at an early age or not. I want Mozart to have been recognized at an early age. It's not grammatically incorrect, this sentence. Okay, it's just not quite the modification that we want, because we want Mozart to be recognized for his privilege, not the greatest composer who also happened to be Mozart. It doesn't quite tell the story I wanted to tell. This third one is, I think, meanest of the three. I waffled a lot on this one, on whether or not it was fair or not. It's pretty tough. Does anyone think they see what the meaning issue is here? Okay, Ryan, what do you mean by that? It's, yeah, in a way, it's kind of similar to the first sentence. What do you mean demonstrate electrons? Yeah, good, Annie. So this sentence says the results demonstrate electrons being emitted, whatever. But the results don't demonstrate electrons being emitted, right? They might demonstrate evidence that electrons are emitted or something like that, but they don't demonstrate electrons being emitted, right? Like you look at the results and there, look, an electron is emitted. That's not the meaning that I want, okay? The experiments might demonstrate that electrons do this. I don't know, but the results demonstrate electrons being emitted. That's not the story that I want the computer to know. Because if I read it objectively, that doesn't quite make sense from what I know as a human to be the meaning of this sentence. Very good. Okay, similar issue in the third one. I'm going to move on for the sake of time. Scientists' ability, where'd it go? Has become more accurate. And an ability, like when have you ever described an ability as accurate or inaccurate? Right, scientists' ability to do this, da da da. Right, because all these things, it's nice to be accurate in them. Like it's nice to make accurate models about the universe, right? But the ability itself to become more accurate is very strange. Okay, not grammatically incorrect, right? So subject and verb, scientists' ability become more accurate, great, but not what I want the computer to take away. Any questions on this page? We'll do 3 more here. Okay, do 3 more. Read them very, very literally. Read them like a computer would. Okay. So some of these are actually, I meant to mention that some of these are taken, they're basically real sentences from actual GMAT tests. Some of them I made up from my own experience or tweaking sentences from other sections and whatnot, but 2 of these are actual GMAT sentences. Okay. If you were working online and need more time, feel free to pause and keep reading. But for the sake of time, because it just always goes so fast, I'm going to go through these 3. So this first one, The most important word to notice here is while, okay? Because a computer knows what while means. It means that, okay, while this thing is true, comma, this other thing is going to be a little different, right? Or, yeah, while he is known as a esteemed scientist, comma, he is also a surprisingly good basketball player, something like that, right? Like there's some contradiction here, and that's just not what this sentence has, right? While more than 300 rivers drain into it, the lake holds 20% of the world's fresh water. Like, well, that doesn't seem to be a contradiction. That seems to like feed and gel nicely with each other. A computer reads this sentence though and thinks, oh, these are opposites. Having rivers drain into a water and a lake that holds a lot of the fresh water, those are separate ideas because of this logical word while. But computer, I want you to think that they are the same thing. I need to use different grammar. Not a grammar mistake, just a meaning mistake. Okay. This second one, the second sentence, which is an adaptation from a GMAT sentence. Okay. I'll tell you where the error is. I'll see what you guys think. The meaning error is here. It is common. Does anyone know why that's a meaning issue? Not a grammar issue, but a meaning issue? Rue says, what does it refer to? It refers to just like the general state of things. This is the only time you don't need an antecedent for a pronoun. It's called the placeholder it. At least that's what we call it. And it just means like, you know, the general state of things. Madison says it doesn't represent the program. And that's kind of where I'm going here. Yeah, good. This conveys something like about the general state of recruitment and loses the first part about a program that tries to attract the best, like a top program that tries to attract the best talent, right? I want this top program, the type of program that seeks the best talent, to commonly recruit the best high school players. But I go from this top program into just like, and also in general, all the colleges are trying to recruit the best high school players from around the country. That may be true, but that's not the story I'm trying to tell. I'm trying to say a top program tries to attack the best talent and commonly recruits the best high school players from around the university, or from around the country, excuse me. Okay, so it's not a grammar issue. It just changes from like a specific case, the top NCAA program, to the general state of things, losing the connection. Okay, this last one on this page makes a similar mistake that we've seen before with this and extended. Okay, this is the greatest road system. Okay, was the Incan Highway and extended. And we'll hold up. That's like, I want the Incan Highway to extend. It was the greatest road system and the Incan Highway extended. It's weird to say the greatest road system was the Incan Highway and the greatest road system extended. It's not a grammar mistake. It's just not the story I want the computer to know. I want the computer to know, hey, the Incan Highway was the greatest road system and the Incan Highway extended all over the place like this. Why do I know that that's what I want? Because I'm a human and I get what the point of the sentence is. It's about the Incan Highway. Let's make sure the computer knows that too. Okay? Not a grammar mistake, pure meaning. And that is from an actual test also. Cool. All right, so let's move on and let's see if we can look at some real sentences. Look at some actual examples and how the GMAT might do this in a sentence. So take a minute 20 here and pick an answer, and then we'll talk about how we can use what we've discussed on a question like this. All right, and we're back. Go ahead. What answer do you pick for this one? Go ahead, type in the chat. We'll call for D. We have some people who are keeping A. Down. It looks like we have some A's and D's seem to be the ones that are coming through most. We have an E. So A, D, and E, which is fitting. They're all three grammatically correct. Okay, B and C have this kind of weird which thing, which is not parallel. All right, so B and C have some problems. So we're down to A, D, and E, and we are, frankly, in a world where the grammar, at least as I understand it, I might have missed something, but the grammar seems to be fine, right? And when the grammar seems to be fine, what do you need to switch your mind to? Where do you need to take your focus, do you think? Meaning. Yeah. When the grammar seems fine, when you really can't parse between, you can't find any more mistakes, look really closely at the meaning. Okay. And what is the word that we really want our computer to understand? That's a weird way of asking that question, but yes, Rachel, that's the which is it's bad. Which can be used in parallel structure to modify something not quite before it, because that's what parallel structure allows. But this is bad parallel structure in B and C. There's no which to pair with the second which. All right. But what reading for meaning, what word does our computer need to latch onto, and do we want our computer to latch onto to understand what's going on here? What do we think is the key word? Rue says fortunately, and I agree. Okay, the key word here is fortunately. If I ended the sentence there, let's play that game, right? If I ended the sentence here and I blocked out the rest, what would you expect to come next? What's the next thing that happens in this sentence? Yeah, right? Like we were bombarded by neutrinos. Fortunately, it wasn't a big deal, right? Neutrinos are harmless, right? Some reason why neutrinos don't matter. And that's what the computer is looking for that too. The computer is looking for, okay, whatever comes next is a good thing. That's what fortunately means. And as humans, we know what that good thing needs to be. We're fine, right? Okay, but we look, and if we look at some of these sentences, D says that these elementary particles are produced in nuclear reactions. Now, it describes them as harmless. But it says, but like the meaning the computer gets is fortunately, these particles are produced in nuclear reactions. Right? And I don't care. Rupneen, I think these harmless particles, I think it's pretty clear that that's referring to the neutrinos. I think that's I think a computer knows that. I think I know that based on context. The problem is that it's not fortunate that these particles are produced in nuclear reactions. It's fortunate that the particles are harmless. But this says they are produced in nuclear reactions. It's a subtle subtle structure change, but it changes how a computer reads this sentence. If a computer reads D, it thinks, oh, good. It must be good that particles are produced in nuclear reactions. That must be the fortunate part. But that's not what I want to be the fortunate part. The fortunate part is that it's harmless. And this description, harmless, doesn't get the meaning across. Same thing with E. These elementary particles are neutrinos. That's not the fortunate thing. Yeah, they're described as harmless, but the fortunate thing is not they are neutrinos. The fortunate thing is that neutrinos are harmless. This fortunate has to describe a clause, the thing that is fortunate. And the thing that is fortunate is that neutrinos are harmless. Okay, D and E are grammatically okay, but they don't get the meaning across. All right, any questions there? In A, can you repeat that? Yes, you can. Okay, it is a parallel structure. which we're not digging into too much today, but to speak briefly, you can say they're elementary particles that are produced and elementary particles that interact very little with matter. What's wrong with C? C gets the first part right. Neutrinos are harmless elementary particles. Great. The problem is this and which. It's bad parallel structure. Is that a rule that should always happen? What do you mean, Annie? Is what a rule that should always happen? Oh, about the parallelism of that? No, you could do either. You could do particles that are produced and interact, or you could say particles that are produced and that interact. You could do either. You just have to be consistent. I think the GMAT is going to err. I say this with 60% conviction. The GMAT is going to err on repeating that. Why is B incorrect? Well, for two reasons, Ben. One is what we're talking about, meaning. What is the thing that is fortunate? Is it fortunate that neutrinos are elementary particles? Fortunately, neutrinos are elementary particles produced in nuclear reactions. No. The thing that is fortunate is that they are harmless. But this description, harmless, is not part of this modifier, fortunately. I need fortunately, neutrinos are safe. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. Fortunately, neutrinos don't kill us. Right? Neutrinos don't turn us into mutants. Rootnine, bad parallel structure. I don't want to spend too much time on parallelism today just for the sake of time, but it's not that using which is bad parallel structure, right? Like I can say the dog, which is friendly, and this is kind of a weird sentence, but the dog which is friendly and which likes to play fetch. Yeah, and then yada, yada, yada. I can do that. That's fine. Okay. But this, you have to be consistent. Notice that this one uses which both times in the parallel structure. And in B and C, we just have one which. So it's not that which is always bad in parallel structure. It's that you have to be consistent. Okay. Read up on parallelism. All right. Notice there's always markers. There's always consistency. Okay. Someday we'll do a free hour on that. But the main rule is be consistent. All right. Okay, so really read like a computer. Make sure the meaning is clear. Take a look at this one, minute 20. All right, so coming back. A, B, and C are gone. Why? Because we have a comparison here. The word unlike means we're comparing things, and we have to compare things that make sense to compare. So I'm comparing severance packages. Unlike most severance packages, well, I need to compare that to a severance package, right? That's the only thing that would make sense. And A, B, and C don't do that. A says, unlike most severance package, workers, I can't compare a severance package to workers. Same thing with B. And then C says the automobile company. I can't compare a package to a severance package to a company. So A, B, and C are out, and we're left with D and E, right? And D and E are both grammatically correct. If we write the full sentences out, we're going to see something that looks like this. Here's what D and E say, and they're technically grammatically correct. But see if we can find the meaning issue. What do we think it is? So Annie says in E, scheduled to collect, but scheduled to collect what is kind of a fair question. I mean, we know human understanding. I know we're supposed to collect the severance package, but E kind of makes it a little vague. And he says their last scheduled day is more clear. Yeah, so Rupnin's really hit the nail on the head here. E says they have to wait until the last day that they are scheduled to collect the severance package as if there are several days when they are scheduled to collect, and they have to wait until the last day. But that's not what I'm trying to say, right? They have to wait until their last scheduled day to collect the severance package, not that they have to wait until the last day they are scheduled to collect the severance package, as if there were multiple days they were scheduled. Not a grammar mistake. It's just that the modifying makes no sense in E as a human if I read it like a computer does. D modifies correctly. All right. No grammar mistakes at all here. D is correct. Okay. I'm going to stop share real quick. So I'm going to fast forward, I think. Yeah, let's jump to this. Okay, cool. So that's meaning. All right, that's reading sentences for exactly what they say as a computer would read them, and making sure that it matches the human understanding. All right, and that can be really, that's a tricky thing to get good at. You have to practice reading words very, very specifically. All right, and again, when you're down to answer choices and you're like, man, these both seem correct, I can't find a mistake. Stop trying to find a mistake, like stop trying to find a grammar issue, and instead think about, what do these words mean? Right? What story is this telling a computer? And is that what I want the computer to know? Okay. Now we're going to talk more about structure, which is kind of a zoomed out, more big picture thing. Not so worried about the words, right? In fact, the words are just kind of placeholders for general, like subject, verb, modifier, right? And we just want to make sure sentences are built in the correct way. All right. So take a look at this. Right. And I want you to look at these, and I want you to tell me what would come after, what would come in the blank part of these sentences. And what I mean by that, I don't mean like what words, what exact words. I mean structurally, what needs to come next? Okay. Do I need a subject? Do I need a verb? Do I need a or could I have a subject? Could I have a modifier, right? What possibilities are there in these blanks? What needs to happen? Right? So take a minute or so to look at these and think about that. What would come in these blanks? take a look at this first sentence, this first part of a sentence, I should say. What comes next? Galileo did not invent the telescope. Okay, great. What comes after that? What could come after that? Good. So Ferris has said but could come after that. And what's going to come after the word but? If but were to come next. But he. Okay. New subject verb. Okay. Good. But he invented something else. I don't know. There's all sorts of things, right? We don't want to think of the exact words. There are all kinds of sentences that could come next. But one thing that could come after this part of a sentence is a conjunction and a subject and a verb. A new clause, right? Galileo did not invent the telescope, but he did invent other things. Or, but he did figure out how to use one, but all sorts of stuff, right? What else could come after Galileo did not invent the telescope? This is, I think, the most likely candidate, but theoretically, what else could come after such a structure? Well, I could do conjunction, like I could say, but I don't know who invented the telescope. Does anyone know? Copernicus? I don't know. Isaac Newton? No, I don't know. But Isaac Newton did. Man, that's embarrassing. Not a scientist. I could say, but Isaac Newton did, right? But that's conjunction, subject, verb. I could say, and he didn't invent something else, but that's conjunction, subject, verb. What other structure could come after this first part? Galileo did not invent the telescope. However, Pauline, however actually is not a conjunction, so that wouldn't come next. That would require that this comma be a semicolon. Same, though could come next, Annie, because though is actually a form of a conjunction. Though Galileo did not invent the telescope, though he did invent something else, whereas Ben did. Sure, okay. We're on the conjunction subject verb train, and that's again very likely, but there's other things that could come up. There could be a modifier that comes after this comma. A few types of modifiers. I could describe what a telescope is. I could say, Galileo did not invent the telescope, which was in fact invented by Copernicus. That's a modifier of the telescope. Okay, I could modify the subject verb. I could modify the whole clause with an ing modifier, as before. So there's a few options in this first sentence. It's either going to be a conjunction, subject, verb, clause. It could be a modifier of some kind describing the telescope, or perhaps describing, Galileo did not invent the telescope, focusing instead on cell biology, which is not what Galileo studied, but focusing his time instead on light photoscoptery, which is not a word. Man, I need to know more science. Okay, that's an ing modifier. Could come after that. All right. But in sentence two, Galileo did not invent the telescope, but on hearing, what needs to come after this? But on hearing that someone did something good. So we're definitely going to get what he heard. But on hearing what he heard. And then what has to show up? He, probably. Yes. Now we have the conjunction. Here's the difference. In this sentence, unlike the first sentence, we have a conjunction. but on hearing what he heard. I know that I'm going to need another clause, which means I'm going to need another subject. And most likely, it's going to be he, meaning he, Galileo. Okay? But on hearing what he heard, probably a comma, he did this thing, something that he did. Rachel, good, yeah. Has to happen. And so good GMAT test takers, I know this might seem like a weird exercise, but good GMAT test takers are thinking about this as they read and looking for what's going to come next. They see, okay, here's a full clause. Well, what can come after a full clause? Here's a full clause with a conjunction. I know what I got to have next. Similar thing with C. Got to have a new subject. How about D? Galileo, even though he had not invented the telescope. Well, I already have a subject. This is kind of a weird structure. I don't know if the GMAT would ever do this, but I have a subject, Galileo, so I need to know what he did. Galileo, even though he had not invented the telescope, did something. Has to be a verb. That's what I'm expecting. And if it's not a verb, if it's like sometimes they'll repeat the subject, that's a mistake. That's bad structure. Okay. This last sentence, even though Galileo did not invent the telescope. Well, that's a subordinate clause. I hate to use that word, but that's a sentence that doesn't stand on its own, right? Galileo did not invent the telescope could be a sentence except for even though. And so I know what's going to come next is even though Galileo did not invent the telescope, he did invent something probably, or he did do this. Has to come next. And if it doesn't come next, then it's a problem. Okay. So let's clear drawings. What comes before? All right, similar game. Based on the structure here, take a minute or so and see what has to come before what's written. Again, not the exact words, structurally, what has to come before. All right. Okay. So a lot of good thoughts coming in here. So some people said for A that a modifier needs to come here, right? And I think that's an option, something that describes he. And this is the end of the sentence with Galileo. I think it's also possible that I could have a subordinate clause, right? Like even though or although subject verb. Although subject verb, he quickly built his own device, right? But here's what it can't be. It can't be an independent clause because this right here is an independent clause. He quickly built his own device. And so I just know that what comes before can't be an independent clause because that would be a comma splice, a run-on sentence. All right. B, someone mentioned this. I need a noun. I need a subject. Someone quickly built his own device. So I need a subject for that. Now maybe I might have, subject verb, comma, conjunction, subject verb. That's a possibility. Could have something like that. but I definitely have a subject. That's got to be there. All right. And on this last one, this third one, some people said, modifier for this third one, but I can't have a modifier, not just a modifier anyway, because this conjunction, subject, verb, Sue, conjunctions are usually fanboys. There are other types of conjunctions like although, even though, while is a conjunction sometimes, but a lot of the conjunctions I'm talking about are fanboys, including on this last one, but. Right here I have but he quickly. Fanboys is a way to remember commonly tested conjunctions: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. If you spell that out as fanboys, just a way to remember them. Okay. This last one, because I have conjunction subject verb, I need a subject verb clause before that. Subject verb, but new subject, new verb. Okay, that's what has to happen. Okay, now, as we close this last 2 minutes, man, I never get to everything I want to get to. What's the point? Well, let's show what question these things came from, and we can see how we use this kind of stuff. So take a minute 20 here with the actual sentence. Go ahead, start putting your answers in as you come to them. Let's see where people are falling here. So I have E's, some D's, some D's. A or D. Okay, well, let's look at D. I see a lot of D's coming in. All right. D says, even though Galileo did not invent the telescope. All right, forget the rest of the sentence now. What needs to come after that introduction, even though Galileo did not invent the telescope? He, a subject verb, okay? An independent clause. All of these are correct. And if you look at D, I don't get that. The subject never shows up. And here's like the beauty of sentence correction. I don't have to read every word. Like all I'm doing right now is looking for the structure. I'm looking for the subject. Where, even though Galileo did not invent the telescope, okay, what did he do? Or what did happen, right? And I don't actually have a he. There's no subject to this sentence. So D is actually out, just based on looking at the structure. And I don't really care about Galileo and telescopes and all what, earlier we talked about meaning. Right now I'm not reading for meaning, I'm reading for structure. I just want to see, what has to be there. Even though Galileo did not invent the telescope means I need a subject, but it never comes. Okay. Galileo did not, so looking at A, Galileo did not invent the telescope, but, okay, well, what needs to happen there? All right, it's not working. There we go. What needs to come after that? But what he did do. Again, same idea, I need a subject. Well, good, I have one. Right, I kind of gloss over all this middle stuff for a second because I don't need to worry about it right now. I'm just looking for structure. But he built, because that built gives me a verb. Great, A has good structure. B, Galileo had not invented the telescope, but I need a subject. Well, this one doesn't have one. Out. C, Galileo, even though he did, okay, so here's this one. Well, I have the Galileo, so I have my subject, but then I have he. I have two subjects all of a sudden. I wasn't looking for another subject. After this, I was looking for a verb. Galileo, even though he did not invent the telescope, did do this, but I double up on a subject. So C is out. Okay. E, even though he did not invent the telescope, I'm looking now for a subject verb. Okay, just a standard subject verb clause. And then I get but, a conjunction. Well, I don't need a but. I already have a conjunction, even though. So but is out. I don't need it. Okay. So you want to, as you read, predict structure. Know what structure you're given and think about what else could or must be there. All right? Because a lot of these can be eliminated, just wiped off the map quickly, just with a quick, no subject, no verb. Does have such drills? We have a lot of structure drills, yes, for sure. Manish, I don't know. I don't know if we have any exactly like the one that we just did, where I like left the blank and had you fill in, what could be there. I don't know if that's exactly in the books, but there are many, many drills designed to help you see structure and to find what we call the core of a sentence. Yeah. So Manish, our sentence correction book is really, really acclaimed. It's probably our best manual. And it's good for native or non-native speakers, but I think it's something you definitely would benefit from. Okay. Nice. Yeah, good. I'm glad you have it. Get to it. A lot of good drills in there for all sorts of sentence correction stuff. All right. So I'm already 4 minutes over. There were other questions I wanted to do, but I did get at least to the main, so I at least got to discuss the stuff I really wanted to discuss. I didn't do every question I wanted to do to show how it can be put to use, but that's something you can do in your work at home. All right. Read for meaning very, very closely. Very, very, what exactly does that say, like a computer? And then sometimes read for structure. Use the structural elements of the sentence to predict what has to come next, to see what has to come next. Okay. Start thinking in terms of broad structure stuff too. All right. I will now stick around to answer questions you all have for me. I'm going to end the recording to those of you who are watching later on YouTube. So thank you for watching. Best of luck in your studies. All right, so let's see. We got the questions. Test coming soon. How would you start to prioritize sentence correction prep? Rachel, sentence correction tends to be the, can you all still hear me, by the way? I want to make sure we're good on that. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so sentence correction tends to be a subject that can be learned really quickly, actually, just because they use the same rules and the same structural games over and over and over again. Okay, so I would just, pick up our manual, learn the rules, and practice recognizing what's happening in a sentence, right? Don't even worry about so much getting it right. That'll happen. But if you can recognize what game is being played, like, oh, this is a structure game. I have to find structure. Oh, again, I have two grammatically correct answers. This is a meaning game. I got to check meaning. Oh, this is a comparison. I have to check comparisons. Oh, I see subject verbs I see verbs that are plural or singular. I got to check agreement. Right? If you build, like we call them knock-knock jokes, like if you know exactly what to look for, you can really see sentence correction bumps quickly. Ferris says, I have all the 10 guides. Are they enough to get a 600? Definitely. If you study them and learn the rules and really, study well, yeah, that has all the information you need to get a 700, 750, right? Has what you need for sure. I'm glad it was helpful. Thank you all for coming. Is 1 month enough? 1 month, 2 hours a day for sentence correction only. That'd be pretty good for sentence correction, Manish. Yeah. That would be a lot of sentence correction work. No, I don't know your practice score, so I don't know if I would advise that unless you're just crushing everything else. Yeah, 1 month of 2 hours a day sentence correction is a lot of sentence correction work. Foundation of verbal too. Nina, it depends on what you are going for. It depends on where you are. Do you need the foundations of verbal? Well, you need the foundations of verbal if your practice test score is, I'd say, below a 20, 28 maybe. I think that would be like, yeah, let's brush up on some of the foundations. Other than that, I don't think you need the foundations of verbal. I think just the manuals will be enough. Manish gives his practice scores. Yeah, so Manish, your quant score is awesome. It's elite already. You can practice it and find a few more points, but you're basically at the top level. Verbal is definitely your weakness, so you want to focus there. I suspect it's more than just sentence correction, though sentence correction is often a place to pick up some quick points. Any other questions, friends? Anything else I can help you with? Same question for the other aspects of verbal. They seem hard to cram for. Rachel, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by these seem hard to cram for. If you mean the test, you're right. This is not a particularly crammable test because it's the rules are part of the game. You have to know the rules, but it's a lot more strategy, approach, thinking process that the test is using these rules as a tool to test these other skills. Excuse me. So again, to prioritize for quick results, I would learn the rules of sentence correction. I would take a look at critical reasoning on the verbal. That tends to be, if you read a critical reasoning manual, a lot of students aren't quite like they aren't aware of the inner mechanics of critical reasoning, and they don't realize it's as structured as it actually is. It seems to be kind of free for all, but if you actually start to look for rules, you'll see that it's very patterned. I actually did if you go to the free GMAT prep hours from a few weeks ago, like we have all of them on YouTube, I did a session on critical reasoning games and things that tend to pop up again and again. If you want to watch that. In quant, I would focus on, depends on what again, I'd have to really know more about you as a student, but I would prioritize probably understanding data sufficiency and the approaches there. I would prioritize percentages and ratios and fractions and all those relative values. Those are a huge part of the test. And again, I'd have to see your practice test to really dig into that. But for quant, or for verbal, sentence correction and critical reasoning tend to be the biggest places to improve. Reading comp is a little bit tougher. All right, friends, I got to go eat dinner. Final questions going once. Oh, I see a Q&A question. Yeah, that was answered. Cool. All right. Cool. All right. Have a wonderful night, friends. Hope to see you at the next free GMAT prep hour. Oh, I've been recording this the whole time, which makes me worried I wasn't recording this session. Surely I wasn't such a fool. Oh dear. Annie, thank you. I'm glad I was recording the session. I don't know why I'm still recording here. Yeah, so did I but I could have sworn I turned it off. Well, thank you all for watching the question and answer session as well. Have a good night, everybody.